Hello again. In this video, we're going to learn how to write equations for quadratic expressions. So let's start with example 1. It says to find a formula for each of the following functions with a to be plus or minus 1. Well, what we're going to do is use the formulas from the last page, and I put them over here on the right. There's the standard form, the factored form, and the vertex form, depending on what you have. If you have your vertex versus factored. This one I'm not going to use very much. It's either going to be factored form or vertex form. And if you remember, if the a is positive, then the graph is upward, something like this. And if a is negative, then the graph is downward and looks something like this. So here we know it's downward, so the a must be negative. So in that case, a is -1. In these two cases, a is upward, and they say it's either plus or minus 1, so it has to be 1. So they're giving us those. On the first graph on the left here, we have the factors, very easy. So I'm going to use the factored form. I'm going to use the second formula, where r is equal to -2 and s, right, because that's where the intercepts are. The r and the s, if you remember, are the intercepts. And s is 4. So we'll just write that there to remind us. So our formula, therefore, is going to be -1, x minus the r, which is -2, and then the x minus the s, which is 4. We can rewrite this a little nicer because you don't really need to write that negative, but though you can. And the first factor can be written as x plus 2. And there you have it. That is the answer of the first one. The second one. Now, this one can be done several different ways. First, we could do it the same way. Or we can use the vertex form. So let's go ahead and practice. So vertex form formula, I've just written right here. If you remember, the h and k are the vertex. So let's write here where h and k, h comma k, is the vertex. Just to remember what that is. So in this case, the vertex looks like 2, -1. That means that the h is 2 and the k is -1. So if you just plug that in, the a we know is 1 already. X minus 2 squared minus, you could put plus -1 or just -1. You don't need to write that 1 as well. That is the answer. Notice how you can, that's a fine answer. You can also write this, do it this way, doing it the factor form way, using that first formula. You can see that a is 1, and the r is 1, and the s is 3. This also works. I know it looks different. One is in factored form, and the other is in vertex form, but they're both the same answer. If you multiplied this out, let's go ahead and multiply this out, and put it in what we call standard form. Standard form, if we write this in standard form, we would FOIL this out and get x squared. We'd have minus 3x minus 1x, which is minus 4x, and then plus 3. If you multiply this out, you're going to get the same thing as well, because you would get x squared minus 4x plus 4, but you have that minus 1, which is a plus 3. So that is a fine answer as well. The first one is in vertex form. The second one is in factored form. And the last one is called standard form, where A, B, and C are the coefficients. They don't have anything to do with the graph, but they're coefficients of the square term, the linear term, and the constant term. So I just wrote here where A, B, and C are the coefficients. So finally, let's work on the last one. On this last one, we cannot do it both ways. We cannot use factor form because it doesn't have any x-intercepts. So this one you would have to do vertex form. So we would use the same formula here, where we would know the vertex. What's the vertex? -3, 2. So the h is -3 and the k is 2. So what would the formula be? The a is 1 here. We're going to use this formula. The a is 1, and then we would have x minus h. So it would be x minus another -3, which turns out to be a +3. Let's draw a line here so we don't get that confused. And then we have +2. So what would that be? You don't need that 1 there. It would be x plus 3. So it was the opposite sign in here, but not on the outside. And you could multiply that and write that in standard form. They did not ask it. I just did it for the middle one to show you what that looked like. So there's the answer to all three. So let's try without the graph. Example 2. Same thing. Find a formula for a quadratic function with zeros, 3 and -5, and y-intercept 0, 12. So this time they are not giving us the a. We actually have to find the a. So which of these three formulas is better? Well, this one they're giving us the zeros, which are the x-intercepts. So we know that these two is the x-intercepts. So I'm going to choose that middle one there, factored form. I'm going to choose factored form, which is f of x is equal to a, x minus r, x minus s. That's what factored form is, if you can see over here. Okay, and what's the r and what's the s? The r is going to be the 3, and the s is going to be, actually it doesn't really matter, you can switch those if you want, -5. So if I just write this here, I do not know what a, So we're just going to leave that alone for a minute. So we have x minus 3, and you can write this as x minus a -5. That's supposed to be an s there. S minus -5 turns out to be a plus 5. How do you find the a? Well, you have this point. You actually can find the a because the a is a constant. It should work whatever point you plug in. So if they give you another point, you can find a. So we could have found a here if they gave us another point. On some of these they did, some of these they didn't. But let's go ahead and on this one find the a. So what am I going to do? This tells me that the f of x is 12, so I should have just put a 12 there. I don't know the a, but the x is 0. So that's a little strange, I realize, but this is just -3 times 15. And -3 times 15 is -45. So I'll just write it as -45a. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up just ever so slightly. I'm going to divide both sides by -45. And that should be the a. Now you can use your calculator, or you could just reduce it. I do know that 3 goes into both of those, so this would be a. If I divide by 3, this would be a 4. If I divide by 3 here, I get a -15. So you could leave it like that. Or if you would rather, you could get the decimal. Looks like it goes downward, doesn't it? And that would be the answer. So you try exercise 2. Please pause it, try it. I'll give you a hint. This one we're going to use, make this smaller just for a minute. Of the 3, we're going to use vertex form. So go ahead and try vertex form and try exercise number 2. And come back when you are ready. So we know that this is the vertex, so therefore, and on our formula, which I wrote here, h comma k is the vertex. So we know this tells us that the h is -2 and the k is 8. So if I just plug that in, I do not know what a is, but I know that this is -2 minus a -2 is a +2 plus 8. And again, just like example 2, if you choose the point, this point, you can find the a. So if I can plug in a 7 for the y and a 0 for the x, because this tells me that the x is 0 and the f of x, which is the y, is 7. I can find my a. So this would be 7 equals 4a, because 2 squared is 4. And then I can subtract, whoops, I have too many arrows here. Let's erase that. Put the arrow there maybe. And go up like this and subtract 8 from both sides. Divide by 4. And you have your a. So we now know our formula, our equation of the parabola. It has a vertex -2, 8, and it goes downward. And it turns out that the smaller this number is, the wider that is. So this is going to be something really wide, where up here, when you have a little larger number, this is not too much larger, it gets a little bit more narrow. To see this, let's look at the following 4 examples. We have y equals 3x squared versus y equals 1/2 x squared. Part C, y equals -1/4 x squared versus y equals -2x squared. And the question is, which of the 3 is the widest? So if the absolute value is bigger than 1, it's going to be narrow. If the absolute value is less than 1, it's going to be wide. That's the idea. Absolute value means without the sign. So here, this largest number is this one. This one's going to be the most narrowest. And the smallest absolute value, not the -2, this one, this is going to be the widest. So the answer is C. Let's check that out on our calculator. So to graph these, I'm just going to go to y equals, and I'm going to put them all in. I'm going to put the first one in, y1. So I'm going to type in a 3x squared. I'm going to go down to y2 and type in, I'm just going to call 1/2 0.5. Point, if I can get the point working. There it is, 0.5x squared. And then I'm going to go to y3. 1/4 is like -0.25. Again, make sure you do not use the minus, but the negative down below. And finally, we have -2. So I have all of them there. And I'm just going to go to graph. You can just hit graph, or zoom 6 if you want to make sure it's the standard window. There's the first one. The second, it's a little wider, even wider. And the third, the fourth. So it looks like this one. If I hit trace and hit the right button, and I can toggle between them, so the one that I have selected right now is the widest one. If you want to see the other ones, here's that curve, 3x squared, right? So each one of these you can check out. This one is the widest. Part C.